She stood in the back of the church, watching her younger sister marry for the third time, and realized no one had saved her a seat. Not in the pew, not at the reception table, not in the carefully planned family photograph where her mother had gestured vaguely and said, "Catherine, just stand somewhere that works." Somewhere that works. At 50, Catherine Brennan had become the woman people worked around. That moment would return to her 3 months later when a cowboy with silver threading through his dark hair would look across a train platform and say words that sounded impossible. "I've been waiting for you." But first came the unraveling. It started the morning after the wedding when her supervisor at Hartwell Publishing called her into his glass-walled office in downtown Chicago. Gerald was 32, wore expensive cologne, and had been promoted over her twice. "Catherine, we're restructuring," he said, not meeting her eyes. "Your position is being eliminated." 22 years. She had edited manuscripts that became bestsellers. Mentored writers who thanked her in acknowledgments she read alone at her desk. "We're bringing in younger energy," Gerald continued. "Fresh perspectives." Younger. The word landed like a stone. She cleaned out her desk in 40 minutes. No one said goodbye. The intern looked relieved she was leaving, as if age might be contagious. At home in her small apartment, Catherine sat surrounded by boxes and faced a truth she had been avoiding. She had built her entire life around being useful to others and had forgotten to build anything for herself. Her phone buzzed. Her mother. "Darling, about Thanksgiving. Jennifer's hosting this year, and with her new husband's family coming, space is tight. You understand." Catherine understood perfectly. That night, she opened her laptop and typed words she never imagined writing. Western Ranch is hiring seasonal help. She had grown up on her grandfather's Montana ranch before her father moved them to Chicago. She still remembered the wide sky, the smell of sage after rain, the way silence felt like breathing. 2 weeks later, she stood on the platform at Riverside Station in southern Montana, waiting for someone from the Silver Creek Guest Ranch to collect her. The November wind cut sharp and clean. Cottonwoods lined the creek behind the depot, their leaves gold against gray water. A truck pulled up. Not new, but well kept. The man who stepped out moved with the kind of ease that came from a lifetime of physical work. Tall, broad-shouldered, maybe late 50s. His hat shadowed his face until he looked up. His eyes were gray like winter sage. "Catherine Brennan?" His voice carried the gravel of mountains. "Yes. Wyatt Callahan. I own Silver Creek." She had expected a ranch manager, not the owner himself. He took her bag without asking, his movements efficient but not rushed. When he opened the passenger door, his hand hovered near her elbow, not touching, just present in case she needed steadying on the high step. "It's a 40-minute drive," he said as they pulled away from town. "Road gets rough past Antelope Ridge." Catherine watched the land open up around them. "I don't mind rough." Something shifted in his expression, almost a smile. They drove in silence, but it wasn't uncomfortable. The truck cab smelled like leather and coffee. The radio stayed off. Finally, he spoke. "The guest season's winding down. We've got 3 cabins still occupied, but most work now is winterizing, inventory, repairs. Your references said you're organized. I was an editor for 2 decades. Organization was survival. She looked out the window. They decided I was too old to understand modern readers." Wyatt's jaw tightened. "That's a fool's way to run a business." The ranch appeared as they crested a hill. A 2-story log house, barns, cabins scattered among pines, and mountains rising like promises beyond. "It's beautiful," she breathed. "It's home," he said simply. He showed her to a small cabin near the creek. Clean, warm, windows facing the water. "Meals are at the main house," he explained. 6:30 breakfast, noon lunch, 6 dinner. If you need anything, I'm usually around." She nodded, suddenly exhausted. He paused at the door. "Miss Brennan." "Catherine, please." "Catherine." He said her name like it mattered. "I read your application 3 times. You didn't oversell yourself. Didn't pretend to be something you're not. That's rare." "I'm 50 years old," she said quietly. "Pretending feels pointless now." His gray eyes held hers. 50's not old. It's just finally knowing who you are. After he left, Catherine sat on the porch and watched light fade over the mountains. Somewhere an owl called. The creek murmured. For the first time in months, the tightness in her chest began to ease. She didn't know yet that Wyatt Callahan was a widower worth $8 million who had been running this ranch alone for 6 years. She didn't know he had watched her step off that train and felt something he thought had died with his wife. She didn't know that tomorrow, when she burned the biscuits at breakfast, he would smile and say, "Good. My late wife made perfect biscuits. I'm glad you're not her ghost." All she knew was that she had been told she was too old to matter, and a cowboy with kind eyes had just suggested otherwise. The work was harder than Catherine expected and exactly what she needed. She woke before dawn to the sound of the creek and dressed in clothes that didn't require dry cleaning. At breakfast, she met the small crew: Tom, the weathered ranch hand who had worked there 30 years, Maria, the cook with fierce opinions about proper tortillas, and Jesse, a quiet young man who gentle broke horses. Wyatt sat at the head of the table, reading a livestock report, but he noticed when she took her coffee black and pushed the cream toward Maria without being asked. Her first task was organizing the guest records: 20 years of reservations stored in boxes, file cabinets, and inexplicably, a drawer in the tack room. "My wife handled bookings," Wyatt explained, standing in the doorway of the ranch office. "After she passed, I just kept things moving. Organization fell away." Catherine heard what he didn't say. Grief had made order impossible. "How long ago?" she asked gently. 6 years, this December." She nodded. "I'll make sense of this." "I believe you will." Days fell into rhythm. She created databases, updated records, discovered the ranch was far more successful than its chaotic filing suggested. In the evenings, she sometimes walked down to the barn where Wyatt worked late, checking horses, repairing tack. They talked. Not about anything profound at first. Just the comfortable back and forth of two people learning each other's corners. "You miss editing?" he asked one night. "I miss the purpose," she admitted. "Helping someone's words reach people who needed them. You're doing that here." She looked at him skeptically. "You organized our tax records," he said. "Saved us $3,000. That's purpose." 2 weeks in, her sister called. "Mom says you're working on some ranch." Jennifer's voice carried that particular tone, concern wrapped around judgment. "Catherine, this seems extreme. Running away won't solve anything." "I'm not running away. I'm running toward." "Toward what?" "Manual labor in the middle of nowhere." Catherine looked out at the mountains turning purple in dusk light. "Toward a life I choose instead of one I settle for." Silence. Then, "Well, don't expect us to rescue you when this doesn't work out." Catherine hung up and realized she was smiling. That Saturday, a late-season guest had a medical emergency. Chest pains that turned out to be severe anxiety. Catherine stayed with the woman through the night, called the doctor, held her hand, and never once made her feel foolish. Wyatt found them at dawn, the guest asleep, Catherine exhausted in a chair. "You didn't have to do that," he said quietly. "Yes, I did." He brought her coffee. Their fingers brushed as she took the cup. "My wife's name was Sarah," he said suddenly. "Cancer took her fast. Too fast." He stared into his own cup. "Everyone said I'd remarry. That a man with a successful ranch would have women lining up." Catherine waited. "But they saw the ranch. The money. Not me." He looked at her. "You didn't know about any of that when you came here." "Should I have?" "Most people research their employers. I researched whether I could do the job. The rest didn't matter." Something changed in his face. "Catherine, I need to tell you something." Her heart jumped. "I saw you step off that train, and I thought." He stopped, choosing words carefully. "I thought you looked like someone who'd survived a storm and decided to stand anyway." "Is that a compliment?" "It's the truth." Before she could respond, Tom burst in. "Wyatt, fenced down in the north pasture. Cattlery getting through." Wyatt grabbed his hat. "We'll finish this later." But Catherine's hands shook as she set down her coffee. That evening, she found him in the barn, exhausted and mud-covered. "Let me help," she said. "You don't know fence work." "Then teach me." They worked until moonlight silvered the fields. He showed her how to stretch wire, set posts, test tension. His hands guided hers, patient and sure. When they finished, he didn't step away. "I'm 58 years old," he said quietly. "I built this ranch from nothing. Lost the love of my life. Learned how to keep breathing when it felt impossible." He pulled off his gloves. "And then you stepped off that train looking lost and brave and real. And Catherine, I've been alone so long I forgot what it felt like to want someone to stay." Her breath caught. "I know you took this job to escape," he continued. "I know you're rebuilding yourself. I won't push. But I need you to know, when I said I'd been waiting, I meant it. Catherine's eyes filled. Wyatt, I'm 50. I've never been married. Never had children. I was told my whole life I was too difficult, too independent, too much and not enough all at once. Good, he said. I don't want easy. I don't want some idea of what a woman should be. He stepped closer. I want you, exactly as you are. Snow began to fall, soft and silent. I'm afraid, she whispered. Of what? That I'll believe you, and it won't be real. He took her cold hands in his warm ones. Catherine Brennan, I am a man of my word. And I give you my word this is real. She looked up at him, snow catching in her hair, and made a choice. She kissed him. Winter arrived fierce and beautiful. Snow covered Silver Creek in deep drifts, and the work shifted to feeding livestock, clearing paths, and keeping cabins warm for the few hardy guests who came for solitude. Catherine moved through it all with growing confidence. She learned to drive the feed truck, help Maria prepare meals for 30 when a corporate group booked the entire ranch, and discovered she had a gift for making guests feel genuinely welcome. But it was the quiet moments that changed her. Mornings when Wyatt brought her coffee before she was fully awake. Evenings when they sat by his fireplace and he read aloud from Lonesome Dove while she mended torn linens. The way he asked her opinion on ranch decisions and actually listened. You should see the books, she told him one January night. Wyatt, you could expand. Build 4 more cabins, increase capacity. He studied the numbers she prepared. Would that make you happy? The question surprised her. It's not about me. Everything's about you now. Her throat tightened. I think it would be good for the ranch. Then we'll do it. The next week, he drove her into town. She assumed it was for supplies. Instead, he parked in front of a lawyer's office. Wyatt, come inside. The lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman named Patricia Voss, greeted them warmly. She laid papers across the conference table. As discussed, Mr. Callahan, these documents make Miss Brennan a full partner in Silver Creek Ranch, with equal ownership and decision-making authority. Patricia looked at Catherine. This includes all assets, accounts, and future profits. Catherine's vision blurred. Wyatt, no. Yes, he said firmly. You've given this ranch order and life. You've given me hope. I won't have you thinking you're here on borrowed time. But we're not even. She stopped. Mary, he smiled gently. We can fix that whenever you're ready. This isn't about marriage. This is about partnership. About you knowing you belong here whether or not you wear a ring. She turned to him, tears streaming. Why? Because someone should have chosen you first, years ago. And since they didn't, I will. Patricia tactfully left the room. Catherine pressed her hands to her face. I spent my whole life being useful so people wouldn't leave. And you're giving me everything before I've proven I'll stay. Wyatt pulled her close. You proved it the night you sat with that frightened guest. You proved it when you burned biscuits and laughed instead of apologized. You proved it by being exactly yourself. He tilted her chin up. I don't need you to earn your place, Catherine. You already have it. She signed the papers with shaking hands. That evening, as snow fell outside his cabin, their cabin now, she supposed, Catherine called her sister. I'm not coming back to Chicago, she said calmly. Catherine, be reasonable. I'm a partner in an $8 million ranch. I'm valued. I'm building something real. And Jennifer, Catherine smiled. I'm happier than I've ever been. Silence. Then, quietly, good. I'm glad. It wasn't much. But it was something. Spring transformed the ranch. Wildflowers carpeted the meadows. Guests returned. Catherine hired staff, implemented new systems, and worked alongside Wyatt from dawn until dusk. One April evening, as they rode horses through the high pasture, Wyatt reined in beside her. Marry me, he said. Not a question, an invitation. Catherine looked at the mountains, the vast sky. The man who had seen her not as too old or too difficult, but as exactly right. Yes, she said. They married in June on the ridge overlooking Silver Creek. Tom officiated, gruff and teary. Maria made tamales. Jesse played guitar. 20 guests attended, mostly ranch friends, people who knew them as they were. Catherine wore a simple blue dress and wildflowers in her hair. When Wyatt kissed her, the mountains witnessed it. Years passed like water over stones, steady, shaping, beautiful. Silver Creek expanded. Catherine's organizational genius and Wyatt's land knowledge made them formidable. They were featured in Western Living magazine, the ranch that chooses people over profit. But Catherine's greatest joy came from something unexpected. She started a program called Second Acts, offering month-long working retreats for women over 40 who needed space to rebuild. They came divorced, widowed, fired, lost, and they left stronger. "You're giving them what Wyatt gave you," Maria observed one morning. "I'm giving them what I needed," Catherine corrected. The belief that 50 isn't an ending. It's a beginning. On her 55th birthday, Catherine stood on the cabin porch where she'd spent her first night. Wyatt wrapped his arms around her from behind. "Regrets?" he asked. She leaned into him. "I regret the years I spent making myself small. But those years brought me here, so maybe they weren't wasted." "They weren't," he said. "They made you ready." She turned in his arms. Silver streaked his hair now. Lines deepened around his eyes. He was the most beautiful thing she'd ever seen. "I love you," she said. "I've been waiting to hear that," he teased. "Liar. I tell you every day. And I'll never get tired of it." That evening, as the sun set over Silver Creek Ranch, Catherine thought about the woman who had stood in the back of a church, invisible and discarded. That woman no longer existed. In her place stood someone chosen, valued, loved not despite her age, but because of everything those years had forged. She had been told she was too old. A cowboy had answered, "I've been waiting for you." And in that waiting, in that choice, Catherine Brennan had finally found what she'd been seeking all along. Not rescue, not reinvention, simply this, a place where being exactly herself was more than enough. It was everything.